In a world where everything is permeated with energy, everyone is a potential master of it without even realizing it. Every second, the brain processes an enormous amount of information. From the tactile sensations of fabric on the skin to subtle background noises and minute changes in lighting, all of these signals are continuously coming in but remain outside of consciousness. Why? Because the brain skillfully filters them out, allowing you to focus on what's important. But this filtering is where the paradox lies, because it can also cause stagnation and limitation. Think back to the last time you had to learn something completely new, whether it was a sporting exercise, a foreign language, or a professional skill. At first, everything seemed clumsy and unnatural, movements stilted and thoughts scattered. But with each practice, with each repetition, it began to get better and better, until finally the skill became almost automatic. What changed at that point? The brain was reorganizing itself, laying down new neural pathways and forming new patterns. This is where true energy control comes into play. Many people mistakenly believe that more energy is needed to achieve goals, but often the problem is not a lack of energy, but an inability to effectively use the energy we already have. How can you learn to channel your energy and unlock your potential? The answer to this question can dramatically change everyone's life. This state can be compared to a car whose gas tank is full, but the driver forgot to remove the handbrake. There is a huge potential available, but it is not properly realized. So how can this annoying nuisance be eliminated? The way to the solution lies in removing the barriers between the conscious and unconscious levels of thinking, which opens access to the hidden possibilities, the existence of which a person did not even suspect. This is not a simple mental exercise, but an approach supported by neuroscience and cognitive psychology. A simple example can be used to illustrate this. It is enough to close your eyes and focus on the process of breathing. It is necessary to notice all the nuances of each breath: depth, superficiality, temperature. It is important not to try to make any changes, but only to observe. After a short time, breathing will naturally begin to change. This indicates that the brain is freeing itself from excessive patterns of control. This principle is universal and applicable in many areas of life. The human mind creates a huge number of invisible rules that are amenable to change or complete elimination. Think of a cat that always lands on its feet, or a small child taking its first steps. They do not follow predetermined instructions, but let their body find the best solution by itself. Over the course of life's journey, as one grows older, one tends to overthink, which often leads to trying to speed up the natural course of events rather than allowing them to unfold organically. People become trapped in established patterns of thinking and behavior that, while they may be useful in certain situations, limit their ability to reach their full potential. Managing one's own energy involves identifying these hidden, deep-rooted patterns and engaging with them rather than fighting them. This process can be likened to learning to surf. Instead of resisting the waves, one learns to harness their energy by riding the crest. One learns how the brain forms a subjective perception of reality and how to correct this perception. It is not about creating illusions, but about seeing what has always been there, waiting to be discovered. The methods offered are practical and simple. There are no complicated tools or years of training required, just clear, consistent steps that produce tangible results right from the start. You can think of the mind as a camera lens that is in automatic mode at the moment, allowing the brain to decide for itself what to focus on. Gaining power over one's own energy opens the gateway to conscious control, giving the individual enhanced capabilities and tangible results. This concept, while it may seem vague, is embodied in concrete, measurable achievements. Athletes striving for new records resort to similar techniques to enhance their performance. Musical virtuosos, hungry for flawless performance, use them to achieve filigree precision. Visionary business leaders seeking crystal clear decisions use these techniques to focus and analyze. The scope of application of these principles is truly limitless because they are based on natural brain mechanisms that most people are not even aware of. Before delving into this topic, it is worthwhile to stop for a moment and realize your surroundings. Try to grasp all the shades of colors, the variety of shapes, and the richness of textures. Notice how your attention involuntarily jumps from one object to another. This continuous movement of the focus of attention is the very tool to be mastered and subjugated to your will. It is important to remember that the path to mastery starts small and requires gradual development. Just as it is impossible to overcome a marathon distance without prior training, one should not expect to instantly master control over complex mental processes. By applying the right strategy, it is possible to achieve a stable development that will be the basis for significant transformation. Specific steps to achieve this goal will be discussed below. A person will learn to recognize the false perceptions created by the mind and will be able to penetrate into the deeper layers of consciousness and self-management without resorting to coercion, but by removing the obstacles that limit his or her potential. The proposed methods are simple, but the results can exceed all expectations. First of all, it is necessary to realize that the subconscious mind is like a matrix, which determines our perception and interaction with the world. The human brain can be likened to a powerful computer that processes a huge amount of information every second. However, much of this information goes unnoticed. At the moment, the brain filters out tactile sensations from clothing, extraneous noises, and countless other stimuli, selecting only what matters and ignoring the rest. This evolutionary filtering system helped ancestors survive by allowing them to focus on threats and finding food, and it continues to function today. Let me present an interesting experiment that demonstrates the amazing capabilities of human perception. Close your eyes for a moment and listen to the world around you. You will probably discover a kaleidoscope of sounds that previously escaped your attention. These sounds were always present in your environment, but your brain, like a watchful guardian, did not consider it necessary to emphasize them to you until you consciously focused on them. This phenomenon of selective attention can be compared to a searchlight beam cutting through the darkness of the night. Everything that this beam is directed at instantly becomes crystal clear, while the rest is plunged into the shadows of obscurity. However, unlike an ordinary spotlight, the human brain has the remarkable ability to switch this beam of attention instantly between the different senses, from vision to hearing, from touch to smell, and back again. It is worth noting that our beliefs and accumulated life experiences have a significant impact on what we notice in the world around us. For example, if a person is convinced of the dangers of snakes, they will be much quicker to notice snake-like forms than someone who is sympathetic to these reptiles. The brain, like a skilled archivist, creates a kind of labels based on acquired knowledge and personal priorities. However, these labels can play tricks on us by misleading us. Imagine a banana illuminated by blue light. Despite the distorted lighting, it will still appear yellow because the brain knows that bananas are yellow in color. Thus, the brain actively adjusts the visual perception to match its expectations. In everyday life, often unbeknownst to us, events occur that escape our attention. However, like athletes, musicians, and other professions, everyone can train their brains to notice more details. Athletes, striving for perfection, spend countless hours in training, honing their skills to the point where they are able to pick up on the slightest movement of an opponent, such as a subtle change in weight distribution that might herald a change of direction. Musicians, on the other hand, develop their hearing by discerning subtle nuances of sound, such as microtones or timbres that go unnoticed by most people. Poker players, in their quest to win, become experts at reading facial expressions or changes in their opponent's breathing, allowing them to recognize bluffs. Cooks, when creating gastronomic masterpieces, develop a fine sense of taste that allows them to detect even minor imbalances of seasoning in a dish. Detectives investigating crimes hone their ability to detect inconsistencies in the body language or tone of voice of interrogators, which helps them spot lies. Stock traders, in pursuit of profit, train their minds to detect patterns and anomalies in market behavior that go unnoticed by other traders. Thus, the human brain has an amazing ability to adapt and evolve. Regardless of our chosen skill or profession, what we focus on becomes more visible and meaningful. Learning to drive is a prime example of developing automatic skills. In the beginning, every element of driving, pedal operation, steering wheel control, mirror control, requires close, conscious attention. Over time, however, through practice and repetition, most of these actions become automatic. The driver's brain adapts by prioritizing tasks and putting routine operations into the background processing mode. A similar process is seen in energy work. At the initial stages, it can be difficult to catch hardly noticeable energy flows, but with experience and regular exercises, these sensations become more distinct and understandable. The brain, like a sponge, absorbs new patterns and forms new neural connections, optimizing the process of perception. This mechanism can be used to develop energy sensitivity. Focused attention directed to energetic sensations allows the brain to recognize patterns that previously went unnoticed. This process can be compared to increasing the contrast of an image. Details that have always been present become more discernible and clearer. As a simple exercise, it is suggested that you focus your attention on your hands. Without making any movements, you just need to feel them. After a while, you may notice a slight tingling, a sensation of warmth, or a subtle pulsation. It is important to realize that these sensations have always existed, but previously the person was not attuned to their perception. The human mind forms its subjective perception of reality based on the limited amount of information available from the environment. Understanding the mechanisms of this process opens up opportunities for expanding the boundaries of awareness and enriching life experience. It is important to emphasize that we are not talking about creating illusions or perceiving non-existence, but about developing the ability to notice and realize details that previously went unnoticed. The matrix of perception is not something fixed and unchanging. It is dynamically transformed by new knowledge and practical experience. Each interaction with energy is an exercise for the brain to discover new patterns and make connections. As experience is gained, energy work becomes easier and more natural. This process can be compared to learning a foreign language. At the initial stage, speech is perceived as a chaotic stream of unfamiliar sounds. However, with time, thanks to practice, a person begins to distinguish separate words, then sentences, and finally, to grasp subtle nuances of meaning. The sounds themselves remain unchanged, but the brain learns to organize and interpret them in a new way. A similar thing happens in energy work. The sensations a person learns to recognize are not something fundamentally new. They have always been present in their sensory experience. What changes is the way this information is processed and presented to consciousness. The brain begins to isolate and analyze energy signals that were previously ignored, thereby expanding the boundaries of perceived reality. Individual experience in energy practices is due to the unique perception of each person. The brain, like a skillful filter, selects and interprets sensations, forming a personalized picture of the world. There is no universal approach, only a variety of ways of perception. Realizing the work of this filter allows you to direct its capabilities to benefit rather than conflict. Natural patterns of perception become a powerful tool for learning new skills. Each step forward, each new knowledge enriches the matrix of perception, creating more effective shortcuts for working with energy. Thanks to this, each subsequent step becomes easier than the previous one. The matrix of perception is a solid foundation for energy work. Harmoniously engaging with it rather than fighting against it makes it much easier to learn and provides consistent results. In building this foundation, it is worth exploring the relationship between perception patterns and quantum reality, where the familiar laws of everyday life no longer apply. Amazing phenomena are hidden in the fabric of the universe. Objects gain the ability to be in multiple places at the same time. Microscopic particles make instantaneous connections across vast distances, and the very act of observation influences what is observed. These seemingly paradoxical concepts actually reflect laws that govern reality at a fundamental level. Let's imagine a spinning coin. In our familiar world, once it stops, it inevitably exhibits either an eagle or a tails. However, quantum particles, like this coin in motion, are able to exist in the state of simultaneous presence of both sides. This phenomenon, known as superposition, describes a situation where an object resides in multiple states until a measurement is made. Quantum mechanics is not just an abstract theory. It is the cornerstone of many modern technologies. Cell phone processors function through the use of quantum effects. GPS satellites rely on quantum computing to provide highly accurate positioning. Even the process of photosynthesis, by which plants convert sunlight into energy, relies on quantum mechanisms. One of the most intriguing features of quantum physics is the ability of particles to form bonds that cannot be explained in terms of classical physics. In the quantum world, there is an amazing phenomenon where two particles appear to be bound together by mysterious bonds. This condition, known as quantum entanglement, demonstrates that a change in the state of one particle is instantly reflected in the other, even if they are separated by vast distances. Albert Einstein, amazed by this feature, called it spooky action at a distance, because it seemed to contradict the fundamental principle established by the theory of relativity that information cannot be transmitted faster than the speed of light. However, the quantum world is not limited to microscopic particles. Its unusual manifestations penetrate into the macrocosm, forcing scientists to rethink the boundaries between quantum reality and our everyday experience. Researchers have successfully translated visible objects into quantum states, creating superpositions with tiny mirrors, miniature metal plates, and even living bacteria. These experiments blur the clear line between the quantum realm and our familiar reality. Quantum mechanics also challenges our understanding of the very nature of reality. It begs the question, can something be considered real if it cannot be directly observed? If a quantum particle can simultaneously exist in multiple places until we measure its position, what does that say about the fundamental aspects of existence? These profound questions force us to rethink our ideas about what is real and what is possible, opening new horizons for understanding the universe. In scientific circles, it is widely believed that quantum mechanics can shed light on the functioning of the human brain. It is assumed that quantum phenomena occurring in brain cells can explain the nature of consciousness, as well as the processes of thinking and perception. Although this hypothesis is still controversial, it demonstrates the potential relationship of quantum physics to various aspects of our lives. The mathematical apparatus of quantum mechanics is highly accurate, but the interpretation of its results remains a matter of debate. Some scientists believe that there are many parallel universes in which different versions of events are realized. Others are of the opinion that our consciousness shapes reality through observation. All these interpretations are consistent with mathematical calculations, but they offer completely different pictures of the universe. Quantum technologies are gradually entering our lives, having an increasing impact on various fields of activity. Quantum computers have the ability to solve certain tasks much faster than classical computing machines. Quantum cryptography offers strong encryption methods that protect confidential information from unauthorized access. Quantum sensors can register the smallest changes in gravitational field, magnetic fields, and even time itself. The fabric of quantum mechanics traces the deep interconnectedness of all things, where even the apparent emptiness of space is filled with myriads of virtual particles emerging from nothingness and disappearing back into it. In this microscopic dance, each particle influences the world around it, blurring the boundaries between the observer and the observed. This principle forces us to rethink the nature of reality. Our brain, like a complex processor, interprets signals from the outside world, shaping our perception of the world. However, quantum physics states that the very act of observation is actively involved in creating the reality we perceive. This means that the world around us may not be as immutable and isolated as we tend to think. Moreover, the quantum world challenges our established notions of cause and effect. In this bizarre reality, effects can precede causes, and particles can influence their own past. The very concept of time becomes more malleable and malleable than we ever imagined. These concepts, seemingly paradoxical and counterintuitive at first glance, are finding confirmation in numerous experiments. With each new test, quantum theory demonstrates its validity, opening the door to the strange and wonderful quantum world, which is not just an abstraction, but an integral part of our reality. We do not notice it in everyday life only because our macroscopic scale does not allow us to do so. The scientific community continues to actively investigate quantum phenomena, opening new horizons for their practical application. Scientists are tirelessly improving methods of controlling quantum systems, which inevitably leads to the emergence of innovative technologies that can change our lives. The quantum world, once the exclusive domain of physics, is now triumphantly entering engineering, biology, and computer science, blurring the boundaries between sciences. This mysterious quantum world opens up a reality beyond our wildest imaginations. It is not just about studying tiny particles, but about understanding the fundamental nature of all things. As we delve deeper into quantum physics, we begin to realize how amazing and full of mysteries our universe is. This realization leads us to the next important question: how does the process of observation itself affect the object of our attention? The quantum world demonstrates conclusively that the observer cannot be separated from the observed. This observer effect is key to understanding not only quantum physics, but also how we perceive the reality around us. The act of observation transforms what we see. This seemingly simple truth is at the heart of quantum physics and carries deep meaning for our interaction with energy. To get a better sense of this idea, imagine a child playing enthusiastically alone. He radiates ease and carefree, as if freedom itself were embodied in his movements. However, as soon as a stranger's gaze touches him, there is a striking change. Shyness restrains him, bravado bursts out, or he seeks refuge in the shadows. This phenomenon is reflected in the microcosm, where quantum particles exhibit similar behavior. The attempt of scientists to measure the state of a particle inevitably entails a change of this state under the influence of the measurement process itself. It is like trying to see if a room is dark by turning on a light, which, however, dispels the darkness we intended to study. So, what does this mean in the context of energy practices? When one directs one's attention to energy, one ceases to be a bystander and becomes an active participant in its movement and transformation. Observation forms an invisible connection, building a bridge between the observer and the object of observation. But this is not a cause for concern, but rather a valuable tool that can be used for one's own purposes. Understanding that attention has an effect on energy allows one to practice more consciously and accurately. The desire to feel the energy in your hands, to concentrate on that feeling, is in itself an act of creation. Our expectations have a direct influence on the formation of the reality around us. This fact raises an important question. If the very act of observation can transform the object of our attention, how can we be sure of the objectivity of reality? The answer to this question may be surprising. Everything that comes into our field of vision has reality. albeit transformed by our perception. This process resembles a complex dance in which each partner influences the movements of the other. Consider, for example, watching a sunset. The palette of colors that appears before our eyes and the feelings it evokes are the result of the interaction between the sunset itself and our personal interpretation of it. Our mood, thoughts, and directed attention all play an important role in determining the meaning of that sunset for us. In the context of energy work, this means recognizing how our attention shapes our experience. If we are seeking a sense of peacefulness, our focused observation contributes to this atmosphere of calm. If we are seeking a source of power, then our attention helps to activate and direct that energy. However, the point is not just the act of observation itself. The observer effect emphasizes the importance of mindful responsibility in our practice. Knowing that our attention has the power to influence what we observe, we need to be clear about our intentions and goals. The influence of the focus of attention on the perception of reality cannot be overemphasized. What we focus our attention on takes on a special significance and power. It is not about creating illusions or substituting reality, but about active participation in shaping reality, as opposed to passive contemplation. In the context of energy practices, this principle is particularly vivid. The practitioner acts both as an observer and as a part of the observed phenomenon, like a photographer who is both behind and in the frame. Let us consider a concrete example. When working with energy, it is important to realize how expectations affect sensations. If a person expects to feel warmth, tingling, or energy movement, these expectations tend to shape their sensory experience. There is nothing wrong with this. On the contrary, it is a natural and beneficial process, as long as awareness is maintained. The observer effect, well known in science, clearly demonstrates that purely objective observation is an unattainable ideal. Every action we take, every perception, every measurement inevitably bears the imprint of our own influence. This simultaneously creates certain difficulties and opens up new horizons. For beginning practitioners of energy techniques, this can be a source of doubt. How can we trust our own sensations when they are partly the result of our own creativity? The bottom line is this: it is the effect achieved that is decisive, not conformity to the dogma of perfect observation. If the methods used contribute to personal growth and wellness, then they are effective. The process of learning to ride a bicycle is a case in point. Initially, the learner may be anxious about the correctness of his or her actions, but once movement begins, the ability to maintain balance and move in the right direction becomes paramount. The same principle applies to energy practices. The focus should be on the results, not on the perfect execution of the technique. The observer effect convinces one to recognize one's role in events. One is not a bystander, but takes an active part in everything one does. Such awareness increases the effectiveness of the practice, as it allows one to refuse to resist one's natural influence and begin to use it wisely. Moving forward, it should be remembered that attention is a tool. Like any tool, it functions more effectively when there is an understanding of how it affects the object being worked with. Observation influences reality, and this knowledge should be used to improve one's performance and achieve more compelling results. This understanding leads naturally to the question of how, based on these principles, to overcome established patterns of behavior and open up new horizons. The notion of an inseparable connection between the observer and the observed will soon become apparent, offering novel approaches to interacting with energy. The traditional understanding of energy as a given, like electricity in wires or heat from a stove, is simplistic. These phenomena are just visible manifestations of deeper processes. Consider the example of turning on a light. The conventional wisdom is that electricity from the power plant flows through the wires into the house and causes the light bulb to glow. This explanation seems logical as it corresponds to the observed picture. However, it is only an illusion, a simplified description of what is happening, designed to make it easier to understand. The truth surpasses any fictions. Energy does not circulate in space. It is initially present everywhere and constantly. What is commonly referred to as energy transfer is actually a sequential transformation of energy states from one form to another. An electric power plant does not deliver energy to the dwellings of consumers, but initiates a fluctuation in the energy field that already permeates all of existence. This disturbance propagates through the electrical grid, eventually reaching the light fixture. At first glance, this may seem like an insignificant detail, but the difference in understanding is enormous. As soon as a person stops perceiving energy as something moving from one point to another, the true picture of the universe is revealed. Everything that surrounds us consists of energy in various states. Matter, as such, is just energy concentrated in an extremely dense and stable form. Consider heat, for example. It is common to say that heat rises upward, but heat is not a physical object moving through space, but energy tending to be evenly distributed. When a person brings his hand to a heated object, he feels not the movement of heat to the skin, but the change of his own energy state under the influence of the energy state of the air molecules surrounding him. The same is true of all known forms of energy. Sound is not a material object moving in airspace, but rather a modulation of pressure occurring in an energy field that is already present in a given medium. Nor is light a stream of particles emanating from the sun. Rather, it is waves propagating in the electromagnetic field that permeates the entire universe. A similar principle underlies electricity. It is not a stream of electrons traveling through wires, but an energy wave transmitted through the surrounding field. Even gravity, contrary to popular belief, is not a force that attracts objects to each other. Rather, it is a curvature of space-time that forces energy to strive for equilibrium. Imagine water flowing down a hill. The driving force is not the water itself, but the difference in energy potential between the higher and lower points. Chemical reactions are also a redistribution of energy within molecules, resulting in the formation of new bonds in the pursuit of an equilibrium state. Wherever one looks, energy is constantly moving, spreading, and transforming, appearing not as something separate, but as the very fabric of existence itself, taking on an infinite variety of forms. This new understanding of energy fundamentally changes the way we work with it. Instead of fruitless attempts to redistribute energy, it is more appropriate to focus on controlling its states, directing them in the right direction. This is similar to how, instead of carrying water in buckets, we can open and close floodgates, controlling the flow of the river. The observer principle mentioned earlier takes on a deeper meaning. We are not bystanders contemplating the actions of energy, but are an integral part of a single energy field, interacting with it through our observations. Every dimension, every interaction is just a manifestation of the influence of one part of the energy field on another. This is not mere theoretical speculation, but a concept with very specific practical applications. For example, solar panels demonstrate higher efficiency when their design is based on the principles of changing energy states, rather than seeking to simply capture sunlight. Batteries last longer when their design focuses on maintaining stable energy states rather than traditional charge storage and release. Even the simplest mechanisms work more efficiently when we refuse to fight natural energy processes and start using them to our advantage. Overcoming entrenched stereotypes about energy requires persistence and training. So deeply are we mired in illusory perception that it seems more true than reality itself. However, once we realize the true nature of energy as a unified field permeating all things, it is impossible to go back to our old perceptions. Next time, when observing the manifestation of energy in any form, one should try to distract oneself from the usual picture drawn by our eyes. Instead of seeing separate moving objects or flows, one should perceive only changes of energy states within a single interconnected system. It is necessary to give up the idea of interaction of separate bodies and concentrate on realizing the influence of different parts of the whole on each other. Such a change of worldview opens new horizons in the sphere of energy utilization. Instead of fruitless attempts to overcome the seeming limitations of energy transfer, we can learn to interact with the natural patterns of changing energy states. We need to stop wasting effort on moving energy from one place to another and focus on creating optimal conditions for beneficial energy transformations to occur spontaneously. The illusion of the existence of separate types of energy moving between independent objects has held back our development for too long. Freed from the shackles of habitual perception, a person gets an opportunity to interact with energy in its true form, as a single, interconnected field of which each of us is a part. This is not just a different way of looking at energy, it is the key to maximizing its effective use. The human brain has an amazing plasticity, a capacity for change and development. Scientists call it neuroplasticity. Every new endeavor creates new neural pathways in the mind. These pathways are capable of replacing old roots that led to limitations in the energy field. The comfort zone is a starting point, not a prison cell. Each step beyond it expands the boundaries of what is possible. Walls that seemed impregnable begin to dissolve, and what previously seemed impossible becomes a reality. However, beware of the mind's insidious tricks that seek to restore the former boundaries. Success can be written off as a mere fluke, and difficulties that arise can be presented as insurmountable obstacles. Such thoughts are just echoes of the old prison. It is worth looking at the children at play who, without a shadow of a doubt, transform themselves into pirates, astronauts, doctors, or dancers. People have not yet learned to limit the horizons of their possibilities. This freedom still lives in everyone, but it is hidden behind bastions of doubt. The senses allow only the reality that the brain expects to see to pass through them. If a person is convinced of the impossibility of something, his mind may miss favorable chances that are right in front of his nose. It is like wearing sunglasses indoors and being surprised by the darkness around you. Freeing oneself from the shackles takes time and effort. You have to start noticing automatic negative reactions and questioning them. The question must be asked, is this really true, or is it just a habitual belief? The walls of the prison of perception were not built overnight, and it is not possible to break them down overnight. However, every time a person questions a limitation, tries something new, or steps out of their comfort zone, they weaken those walls. The true boundaries of possibility lie far beyond what the mind tells us. Think of a man who, inspired by his doing something that seemed impossible, he faced the same mental barriers but found the strength to overcome them. Prison guards are their own thoughts. They patrol the walls armed with doubt, fear, and ingrained habits. Each person holds the key to their own cage, being able to choose to think differently, take different steps, and create a new story for their life. It is not just about an optimistic view of the world, but an accurate and realistic perception of reality. It is important to see things as they are without letting fears distort them. One should pay attention to opportunities that the mind may overlook, as if filtering them out. The perception of a person's prison may seem immutable, but it is actually made up of paper-thin thoughts. These thoughts can be torn apart with questions, curiosity, and small but courageous actions. Each step makes a person stronger. Each wall broken down demonstrates the potential that is hidden within them. The world beyond this prison of perception is much bigger than one can imagine. It is full of possibilities that the mind may have hidden from view. The door is open, the walls are ready to crumble. You just have to take the first step. The quantum mirror reveals amazing aspects of energy functioning. Let's imagine an ordinary mirror in a bathroom. When a person looks into it, they see their reflection. But what if that mirror could show all the different ways in which energy moves and changes? Imagine a mirror that has amazing properties. Instead of a normal reflection, it shows countless versions of the same scene. Each reflection is energy manifesting in different forms. In one, the heat emanating from the body rises as scarlet waves. In another, electrical impulses run through nerve fibers like blue sparks. And in a third, atoms in cells make complex oscillations and movements. But this mirror not only reflects current events, it also allows us to look into the future, showing possible variants of events. Like circles on water, any slight change in energy generates new patterns and probabilities. When a person moves his or her hand, the mirror displays hundreds of potential paths that the energy can take. The most amazing part is that the mirror not only shows these processes, but influences them. The very act of observing energy changes the way it moves. Scientists discovered this phenomenon when studying tiny particles. The process of observing them changed their behavior. Let's remember how a ball is thrown. You can usually predict its trajectory based on the force of the throw. But in the quantum world, where tiny particles rule, different laws apply. Here, the ball can be in many places at the same time, and only observation makes it choose a specific point. Quantum mirror opens our eyes to the fact that we are not just outside observers of energy, but direct participants of its dance. Every measurement, every observation, every attempt to control the energy makes changes to it. It is like trying to hold smoke in your hands. The very movement towards it changes its shape. This principle may seem paradoxical, but it explains why our efforts to control energy do not always produce the results we expect. We cannot remain idle puppeteers pulling the strings because we ourselves are reflected in this mirror, being a part of the energy system we are trying to control. Some energy professionals have already adopted this idea. Instead of fighting this strange effect, they have learned to use it to their advantage. They realize that often the best way to channel energy is to step aside and let it follow its natural path, like water flowing downhill. The mirror also opens our understanding of time to new horizons. In its reflections, we see that energy does not just rush forward like an arrow, but spreads in all directions at once, forming complex networks of interconnections. Past and future intertwine in whimsical patterns that resemble a dance rather than a straight line. This fact fundamentally changes the way we think about energy management. Instead of forcing it into a desired shape, we can learn to decipher these complex patterns. For example, identifying the points where small changes can cause large-scale effects, just as finding the right place to strike a crystal glass makes it sing. But the mirror teaches us another important lesson. Sometimes when we look into it expecting chaos and confusion, we find surprising order. The same patterns are constantly repeating themselves, like fractals in nature. Think of how the branches of a tree resemble smaller copies of the whole tree, or how clouds form similar shapes at different scales. These patterns tell us that even when energy seems chaotic and unpredictable, it can be governed by hidden rules. Not strict laws like the rules of the road, but rather the principles by which birds fly in formation or waves crash against the shore. The quantum mirror is not an item available for purchase or self-made, but rather a metaphorical way of realizing our relationship with energy, whenever an attempt is made to measure, control, or alter energy flows. It is as if we are looking into this mirror, and the reflection we see is not just energy, but ourselves, connected to all things by invisible threads of cause and effect. Such a vision radically changes the approach to working with energy. We stop perceiving it as something separate, requiring subordination and control. Instead, we come to realize ourselves as an integral part of the energy flow, like a leaf floating on a river. We can direct our movement, but we remain part of the overall flow. The next time you interact with energy, it is worth imagining that you are looking into a quantum mirror. Try to see the diversity of possibilities coming from each moment. Pay attention to how your attention affects the process you are observing, and remember that you are not just observing the dance of energy, but you are participating in it yourself. The very act of observation changes what we see. This simple truth is at the heart of quantum physics, but it also shapes our daily lives in ways we rarely notice. Imagine a child playing enthusiastically alone. His movements are free and uninhibited. He dances uninhibitedly. He carries on conversations with himself. However, it is worth only to pay close attention to him as his behavior undergoes a change. In him awakens shyness. He may begin to brag or, conversely, hide. This principle is also reflected in the depths of our consciousness. When we direct our attention to our own thoughts and feelings, they are transformed. A headache feels different once we focus on it. The rhythm of breathing changes when we become aware of it. Our gait becomes different when we reflect on how we move. Scientists have discovered a similar effect by studying tiny particles. They found that measuring the position of a particle affects its velocity, and measuring the velocity in turn changes its position. It is impossible to know both parameters at the same time. The observation tool itself has an effect on the object. But this phenomenon is not confined to physics. It permeates our experience of life. When a person is seized with anger, he is completely immersed in that feeling. But as soon as he takes a step back and realizes, "I feel anger," a shift occurs. The anger does not disappear instantly, but the attitude toward it changes. Realizing ourselves as more than a collection of habits and reactions opens up exciting possibilities. By gaining an understanding of your own behavioral patterns, thoughts, and emotions, it becomes possible to bridge the gap between stimulus and response. It is in this gap that we have the freedom to choose a different path. Consider the example of anxiety. As a rule, anxious thoughts arise spontaneously, forming a chain of fears, where one generates another. However, if we can recognize the incipient pattern, its development can be halted. Simple awareness can break the spell of intrusive thoughts. The same principle applies to physical tension. Often we don't notice the stiffness in our shoulders or the clenched jaw. But in the moment of realization, we can relax, for the observation itself becomes the solution to the problem. However, there is a nuance here. It is impossible to encompass all aspects of one's experience at the same time. Like quantum particles, some facets of our perception become clearer while others become blurred. This is normal because we can shift our attention as needed, like adjusting the focus of a camera. This raises a legitimate question. What should we observe first? The answer to the question of change lies in what it is that we are trying to change or understand. In an attempt to get rid of an ingrained habit, it is advisable to focus on the factors that provoke its manifestation. In the process of learning a new skill, it is useful to record the structure and characteristics of training. When building interpersonal relationships, it is worth paying attention to your communication style and manner of interaction. The main condition for success is to observe impartially, like a scientist collecting data. It is important to see the real picture and not to project your own expectations and ideas of how things should be. It is this unbiased awareness that paves the way for natural change. Sometimes these changes are subtle, a slight change in posture, a slight pause before responding, a slight reduction in tension. In other cases, the changes can be dramatic, leading to a complete rethinking of behavior or worldview. In either case, the starting point is observation. This brings us back to the starting point. The mere fact of observation changes our perception. Now, with this knowledge, we can be more conscious and strategic about what we pay attention to and how we observe. We can use our awareness as a tool for personal growth and positive change. The observer effect is not just a quirk of quantum physics or a psychological curio, but a tool that is quite applicable in everyday life. By consciously choosing the object of observation and the way of its study, a person gets an opportunity to control this principle and not to be its involuntary victim. The next time there is a desire to change something in one's life, one should start by carefully observing it. There is no need to try to force change, just observe with curiosity and patience, letting the power of attention do its thing. After all, in this dance between the observer and the observed, change happens all the time. The pictures that arise in the mind shape reality much more powerfully than meets the eye. The human mind can be likened to a movie projector that continuously broadcasts films of expected events. These mental movies influence feelings, actions, and as a result, outcomes. Let's consider two examples of such mental movies describing the same situation. A person enters a room full of people. In the first version, he sees himself as awkward, out of place, and feels the evaluating gazes. His heart starts beating faster, his muscles tense up, and before anything even happens, anxiety creeps in. Imagine rewriting the script of your own life, like rewinding a movie in your head and starting a new version. This time you see yourself confidently walking into a room, at ease with those around you and engaging in interesting conversations. Notice how your body feels more relaxed and your energy flows more freely, simply due to the change in the mental movie. These internal movies scroll automatically most of the time, shaped by past experiences, the words of others, and the beliefs we've adopted about ourselves. But here's the interesting thing. We can learn to be the directors of these inner movies, not just passive viewers. Start by catching yourself in the moments when negative scenarios play out in your head. Perhaps you're about to give a presentation and your mental movie is showing how wrong you are and people are laughing. Stop that projection right now. Take a deep breath. Then consciously create a new movie where you speak clearly and concisely and people listen with interest. The secret is not to constantly force yourself to think positive. That's unrealistic. Instead, learn to become aware of what movies you play and how they affect your energy. Some people think this is just wishful thinking, but research shows that the brain reacts to mental rehearsal almost the same way it does to real-life experiences. The brain sees no difference between an authentic event and one that is vividly imagined. Athletes apply this principle by mentally practicing movements, honing technique without even going on the field. Musicians use it by practicing in their imagination, visualizing their fingers fluttering across the instrument and their voice taking in every note. Orators resort to it when rehearsing their speech, imagining the energy of the audience and their confidence on stage. Chess players simulate entire games in their minds, anticipating their opponent's moves and their counter strategies. Even surgeons use this technique, visualizing the exact steps of a complex procedure to ensure a steady hand and a focused mind. The same principle can be used to shape energetic decisions and actions in any situation. Transform your dreams into reality by creating such vivid pictures of your desired future in your mind that your brain begins to perceive them as a fait accompli. This is not just positive thinking. However, the secret is to create realistic mental movies that reflect your inner truth, not fantasy scenarios that your mind will reject. Visualize yourself mastering a new skill. Don't immediately visualize yourself in the role of an expert. Instead, focus on gradual progress, visualizing yourself improving step by step and successfully overcoming challenges as they arise. Let's try to put this method into practice. Recall a situation that usually causes you anxiety. Pay attention to what movie automatically plays in your mind. Don't immediately strive for the perfect scenario. Instead, make small adjustments to the existing picture. If you see yourself failing completely, change the scenario so that you handle the situation satisfactorily, even if not flawlessly. If you imagine others criticizing you, change their reaction to neutral or slightly supportive. Make these new mental movies as detailed as possible. What do you see? What sounds do you hear? What sensations does your body feel? The more senses you use, the more real this image becomes to your brain. Exercise regularly, playing back in your mind improved versions of the development of events, not deceiving yourself, but training your brain to consider new horizons. Such practice transforms the human energy field. By systematically visualizing favorable scenarios, the nervous system calms down, the body language changes, sending other signals to others, and often reality begins to correspond to these new mental pictures. Think back to the times when you worried incessantly about something, creating detailed disaster movies in your imagination, and think about how much energy was wasted. Now imagine using that same mental power to create positive scenarios. It's not about denying possible difficulties, it's about consciously choosing to channel mental energy. The point is not to never experience negative thoughts, but to realize that everyone has a choice about which mental movies to play and revisit. Every time a person catches themselves replaying an unconstructive scenario, they have a chance to change it. Over time, this becomes natural, and the mind will automatically create movies based on old patterns, which is normal. As you exercise your role as director of your own mental movies, your skill in quickly recognizing the moments when the old projector starts up again will grow, allowing you to choose more useful scenarios. This skill builds a bridge between your current situation and your desired future, scene by scene. The mind continuously generates a stream of thoughts, images, and stories, but there is something deeper watching all this unfolding action. This observing entity is what we really are. When we realize this, we begin to understand that our thoughts and the world they create are not as immutable or serious as they seem at first glance. Imagine sitting in a movie theater. All sorts of scenes are unfolding on the screen, joyful, frightening, exciting, but you're just sitting there watching it all. You won't get wet when it rains on the screen. The monster can't hurt you. Similarly, our thoughts create a movie in our mind, but we are the awareness watching it. This observing entity is always present in every experience. It knows that you are reading these lines right now. It notices your breathing, the sounds around you, the sensations in your body. Awareness is not fleeting like thoughts. It is the unchanging backdrop to everything we experience. When we mistakenly identify with our thoughts, we suffer in vain, believing that we are our anxieties, plans, and regrets. However, all these are but transient phenomena in awareness, like clouds floating in the sky. The sky itself, which is pure awareness, remains unaffected. This is not just an entertaining idea, but an indication of something immediate and practical. Right now, you may notice that you are aware of what is happening. This awareness allows you to read these words. What is it that is aware of the appearance of these words? What is it that notices your thoughts about what you are reading? You may say, I am aware, but look more closely. This I that is aware, can it be detected, or is there simply awareness as such, aware of everything that manifests? The sense of the separate self is itself just another manifestation in awareness. This is the meaning of unity. Not that everything becomes a single mass, but that each thing arises within and as awareness. The world as such does not disappear. The inner world of man is a continuous stream of thoughts and feelings, which, however, do not appear as something frozen and isolated, but as fleeting manifestations of awareness itself. Everyone can verify this with his own experience by conducting a small mental experiment. Where is a thought born? It does not occupy a certain place in space. It cannot be localized. Thoughts arise in awareness itself. And where do we perceive sound? Again, in awareness. Where is bodily sensation felt? Again, the answer is in awareness. Everything that one experiences arises and is learned through awareness. At first glance, this may seem like abstract reasoning, but in fact, it is the very concrete reality available to everyone here and now. You don't need to look for special states or unusual experiences to be convinced of this. It is enough just to pay attention to what the present moment realizes. When this becomes apparent, something important happens. One ceases to treat one's thoughts with the same seriousness as before, and the need to protect the illusory self disappears. One realizes that awareness is already complete and all-encompassing. Life unfolds like a movie, where events change each other. But this does not mean passivity or detachment from the world. On the contrary, it opens up new opportunities to interact with life based on a clear understanding of one's true nature. The process of activity continues to unfold organically, but its source no longer lies in a narrow sense of self, but in an awakened awareness. The individual responds directly to life's circumstances, bypassing the distorting filter of ego and personal history. The mind is likely to oppose this by putting forward counterarguments. What about my difficulties? What about my destiny? It's like an escape from reality. However, it is worth looking at personal experience and asking the question, is observing one's awareness really escapism? Or is it, on the contrary, seeing reality in a clearer light, recognizing one's true nature? Over time, this awareness is able to deepen as one becomes more at rest, as awareness, rather than as a thought-based self. Existence becomes more simple. Difficulties do not disappear, but they are seen as manifestations within awareness rather than personal burdens. More space, more ease, and more natural responsiveness emerge. This is the authentic human condition. There is no need to attain it or strive for it. One need only pay attention to what is already present in the here and now, the conscious presence that everyone is and has always been. Everything arises within this presence, including the thought that says otherwise. Look within yourself and notice the essence that perceives these words, that is aware of your thinking about them, that remains unchanged in moments of silence when the flow of thoughts dries up. This awareness is your true essence. Everything else, thoughts, emotions, sensations, are but fleeting phenomena arising and disappearing within it. This is unity. Our mind creates a subjective reality that seems absolutely true to us, but in reality is different from the true state of affairs. Imagine you are watching a movie. We see moving pictures on the screen and are completely immersed in the story, experiencing genuine emotions and reactions, even though we realize that it is just a play of light and sound. A similar process unfolds in our daily lives. Our brain receives information through the senses and constructs a picture of the world that we accept as reality. However, this reality is not direct and immediate. It is processed, filtered, and shaped by our past experiences, beliefs, and expectations. Let me give you an illustrative example. When you look at a tree, you are not seeing the tree itself in its pristine essence. Your brain perceives the light waves, analyzes them based on your learned concept of the tree, and creates an image that has a certain meaning for you. Human perception of reality is a subjective process, often far removed from an objective picture of the world. Just as looking at a tree can be distorted by the perspective of the observer, emotional reactions are filtered through the prism of personal experience and memories. The feelings experienced by an individual are not a direct reflection of events, but rather an interpretation of them colored by individual history. For example, not being greeted back by an acquaintance may generate resentment or anger rooted in the experience of rejection, while the real cause may have been simple inattention. This subjective reality, while it serves an important function in allowing one to quickly orient oneself in the world and make decisions, is not without its flaws. It can imprison a person within limiting beliefs and behavioral patterns. Fears formed on the basis of past failures can prevent people from taking advantage of new opportunities, even if circumstances have changed dramatically. The perceptual illusion goes deeper, affecting an individual's sense of self. The self-image that is formed over the course of a lifetime is also a construct subject to distortion. The individual tends to create narratives about his or her own personality, and that, based on isolated incidents or subjective evaluations, can become self-limiting prophecies. Statements such as, "I am not good at math," "I am unlucky in love," or "I can't handle stress," become part of the self-identity, hindering development and self-actualization. The stories we tell ourselves seem true because of the frequent repetition, but they are really just persistent neural circuits in our brains. Social media adds to the confusion by showing us embellished versions of other people's lives that we compare to our own, often unsightly reality. This contrast only widens the gap between what we see and what is real. Money is also a powerful illusion in which we all participate. Paper bills and numbers on bills have value only because we, as a society, have agreed to believe they do. The entire world economy rests on this universal belief. Even time may be arranged differently than we are used to thinking. It seems to us that time flows from past to future in a straight line, but physics hints that this may not be quite so. Our sense of the passage of time is another construct created by our minds. Liberation from these illusions does not mean abandoning them altogether. Rather, it is recognizing their nature and using them as useful tools for functioning in society. It is about recognizing that our beliefs and perceptions are merely mental constructs, not immutable truths carved in stone. Think of how convincing a dream seems while we are in it. Only upon awakening do we realize that it was only a play of imagination, far from reality. Similarly, realizing the illusory nature of our everyday perceptions can be a kind of awakening to a deeper understanding of the world. This realization has the potential to bring liberation. By recognizing that our limitations are often self-imposed through our mental constructs, we are empowered to question them and, if necessary, change them. After all, if our brains have been able to create these stable patterns of thinking, they are quite capable of creating new, more adaptive ones. However, this recognition also brings with it a certain responsibility. Once we begin to understand how our minds shape our perception of reality, we become more aware of our role in creating our own experiences. We can no longer blindly blame external circumstances for everything, shifting responsibility for our lives to others. But the good news is that realizing the illusory nature of our experience gives us much more control over it. Just as a movie loses its emotional power over us once we remember that it is just fiction, our fears and anxieties also lose some of their power when we begin to see them as mental constructs created by our own minds. It should not at all be assumed that our inner feelings are without foundation. On the contrary, at a given moment in time, they are felt by us to be absolutely genuine. But the realization that these experiences are the product of our minds empowers us to reinterpret and transform them. Notice how different cultures create very different pictures of the world. What is taken for granted for one group of people may go completely unnoticed by another. This illustrates the extent to which our perceptions are conditioned by our internalized ways of seeing the world. A life lived under illusion is like being in a theater production where we are both actor and spectator. We can become fully immersed in the unfolding drama, or we can step back and remember that what is happening is just a performance. Both of these perspectives have a right to exist. The key is to find harmony, skillfully using illusion when it benefits us, while at the same time remaining aware of its artificial nature. This awareness opens up opportunities for change and personal growth beyond the limitations of our current perceived reality. The moment of awakening comes to each person differently. For some, it is like a lightning strike, sudden and overwhelming. For most people, the realization comes gradually, like the dawn shyly breaking through the clouds. Once you see it, however, there is no turning back. Think back to those moments when you had a vague feeling of something wrong. those fleeting doubts that arose when watching news reports, or an obsessive premonition that something didn't add up. These were not just random thoughts, but the unmistakable signals of your inner compass pointing in the right direction to the truth. Since childhood, we have been trained to unconditionally accept what is presented to us. We have been trained in educational institutions to memorize mechanically rather than to think critically and ask questions. The media feeds us ready-made, filtered views rather than allowing us to analyze the facts for ourselves. The social system encourages conformity and suppresses independent thinking. But somewhere deep down, each of us feels these invisible shackles. The truth, paradoxically, is simple. We are born free, and it is not only about formal, legally enshrined freedom, but about freedom of mind and spirit. No one has the right to infringe on our thoughts, limit our potential, or force us to follow a path not chosen by us. And yet, this is exactly what happens to us every day through sophisticated manipulation. Take a look at the modern way of life. Waking up to the annoying ringing of the alarm clock marks the beginning of a day filled with a rush to work, often disliked. Acquiring unnecessary items, watching entertainment programs that dull the intellect, and finally, the exhaustion that precedes bedtime, only to repeat the vicious cycle again the next day. Society imposes the idea that this is the norm, success, life itself. But is it really so? The truth is that everyone has much more power over their lives than is commonly believed. Thoughts shape reality, focus determines experience, and decisions pave the path of life. However, this power is gradually lost until the very fact of its existence is erased from memory. But do not despair. This power does not disappear anywhere. It just slumbers, waiting for its time. Regaining control over your own life begins with a simple but important step: to question conventional truths. Not out of a sense of paranoia, but out of genuine curiosity. Ask yourself questions. Why do I hold certain beliefs? Who benefits from me believing this particular belief? What would change if I changed my beliefs? Asking questions becomes the key that unlocks the gates of perception, dispelling the darkness of delusion and allowing the rays of truth to penetrate the innermost corners of consciousness. As one begins this journey of knowledge, one is inevitably confronted with repetitive patterns, with how fear is skillfully used to control social behavior, how artificially created scarcity breeds fierce competition, and how constant distraction takes one's eyes away from the things that really matter. Gradually, the fragments of the mosaic come together to form a coherent picture. However, there is one aspect that is carefully hidden from truth seekers. Awakening is not only the realization of existing problems, but also the understanding of potential opportunities. Freed from the shackles of mental limitations, a person discovers in himself a source of inexhaustible creative energy that he did not even know existed. The feeling of inner strength, seemingly lost forever, returns. One rediscovers one's true essence, but this awakening brings with it a burden of responsibility. Having seen the truth once, it is impossible to return to the previous state of ignorance. One accepts responsibility for one's personal growth, for one's decisions, and for one's life path. From now on, there is no place for blindly following other people's instructions or mindlessly taking everything on faith. On the path to personal awakening, there will inevitably be those who try to stop the process. Do not be surprised if you hear accusations of insanity or calls to return to the old way of life. Such a reaction is understandable because any change, especially one that challenges established beliefs, causes internal discomfort in people. In this situation, it is important to stay true to your principles, defending your truth not from a position of aggression or condemnation, but with unperturbed calmness and confidence. Truth does not need to be defended, it simply exists as a given. Your job is not to change the minds of others, but to live according to your beliefs, setting an example of authenticity. Start small. Question one of your beliefs today. Change one habit tomorrow. Take a small step toward your authentic self next week. Remember that even the smallest steps eventually lead to significant change. The key is consistency, not speed. The journey of awakening may seem lonely at first, but as you keep moving forward, you are sure to meet like-minded people who share your views, ask the same questions, and strive for the same goals. Meetings with meaningful people will happen at the most opportune time when you need them. It is important to realize that spiritual awakening is not an end goal, but a never-ending journey of self-discovery and development. Each new day brings new revelations, poses new questions, and provides unique chances to make a choice in favor of the truth instead of remaining in the captivity of illusions. Certainly, there will be days along the way that seem more challenging and difficult than others, and that is perfectly natural. Progress is rarely straight and even. The most amazing aspect of awakening is the realization of limitless human potential. Humans are not limited beings doomed to a humble existence. On the contrary, they are powerful creators with the ability to shape the very reality around them. This profound truth has long been hidden from them because it poses a threat to those who capitalize on their dormant state. Now is the time to awaken, not because some outsider is calling for it, but because the heart itself tells you that this is the right path. One must trust one's inner voice, follow that quiet but sure knowledge, and boldly unleash one's power. The illusion that enveloped the world is gradually crumbling, and every day more and more people are waking up, realizing what is happening. It is important to remember that no one is alone in this endeavor to see the world through the shroud of deception. Together, people are creating a new reality based on truth, freedom, and genuine connection with each other. It is a time of realization, of personal rebirth, and of realizing the truth. If the viewer is familiar with the movie Inception, he or she has already come into contact with the idea that reality takes shape through faith, imagination, and determination. And this is not just the fiction of the filmmakers, but the very real reality. Energy, focus, and conviction have the potential to transform the world around us. For a deeper dive into this topic and mastering the art of managing your energy field, it is recommended to read the video material dedicated to energetic self-realization. This will be a logical continuation of the path of self-improvement. If the information presented is of value, do not be stingy in expressing your gratitude in the form of a like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with new publications. The author encourages you to share your thoughts on how much the movie Inception has influenced the redefinition of the concept of reality. If one feels the onset of change and a readiness to embrace one's true power, it is suggested that one express this by saying, "I am ready." Gratitude is expressed for following the path of spiritual awakening together. See you again.